The Quran is one of the important foundations of Islam. Not all Muslims read, know or follow it, but it is a compass that influences Islamic society and culture, and so it is important that we have some understanding of this book. The Quran, like the Bible, is often quoted publicly when people discuss Islam, so again it is important that we have some understanding of this book so that we can engage with these quotes and claims in an informed way. In this session, we are going to learn about the Quran and the other essential books that Islam has. What is the Quran? The Quran is a collection of what Muhammad recited over a 23-year period in response to different situations in his life. He claimed that what he recited came from the angel Gabriel, who was sent with these words from God. And so Muslims believe that the Quran is the very word of God. The language of the Quran is the Qurayshi dialect of Arabic that Muhammad spoke. When you open up a Quran, what will you find? In the standard Quran, there are 114 chapters which are called surahs. Each chapter or surah has a traditional name in the same way that the books of the Bible do. And in the same way that the title 1 Corinthians brings to mind certain things for a Christian, so too these surah titles bring to mind certain ideas for Muslims who read the Quran. The surahs are not arranged chronologically in the order that Muhammad said them, but generally from largest to smallest, though they do seem to be grouped in similar themes. A verse in the Quran is called an ayah, and there are a few different verse numbering systems, so you need to be careful when looking for a verse. It may not be exactly where you expect it to be. There are slightly different Arabic versions of the Quran used around the world. I'm not talking about translations, but different Arabic versions. Each of these versions is according to a famous reciter of the Quran. There is the Quran according to Imam Hafs, according to Imam Warsh, according to Imam Kalun, according to Imam al-Juri, and there are others. If you want to read the Quran in Arabic, then you have to read it according to one of these versions. The differences between these Qurans only have a minor effect on meaning. How do Muslims use the Quran? What place does it have in their life? The most common way that Muslims use the Quran is as liturgy. It is recited by Muslims in the original language in their prayers and as part of their worship. It is read publicly in the mosque in the original language too, and for many Muslims, reciting it in Arabic is beneficial even if you don't understand Arabic. And Muslims often use the Quran as a form of decoration in their home or car, where they may have verses framed or hung. Translations of the Quran are not considered to be the real Quran, but are still widely used and given away. Muslims also believe that the Quran is a clean book, that is ceremonially clean, and that you must be ceremonially clean to touch it, and of course it must be honoured and respected. Now, it is important to realise that the Quran is very different to the Bible. What is the Bible? The Bible is a collection of many different books from many different prophets over about a 1500-year period. It has the Torah, the books of the prophets, the Psalms, and the books of the Gospel. The Quran, on the other hand, is just from one man. It only contains what Muhammad recited. It does not contain any of the books of the Bible, but only what Muhammad said. And this is why Christians and Muslims believe such different things. Christians read all the prophets, and what we believe comes from all the prophets, but Muslims only listen to Muhammad. Most Muslims have no idea what is in the Bible. They assume it is something like the Quran. So when you talk with a Muslim, make sure you explain to them that the Bible contains all of the prophets. You may like to use a Bible with a cover like this. Now, while the Quran is important to Islam, it does not contain everything a Muslim needs. It is not sufficient. Firstly, it is a collection of what Muhammad recited in response to different situations in his life. But what these situations were is not recorded in it. Thus, it is a book that does not provide a context. And without knowing the historical context, you cannot understand or apply the Quran properly. To understand the context, you have to go outside of the Quran to other books. Secondly, the Quran does not contain many of the essential instructions for Muslims. For instance, circumcision is essential for Muslims, but is never mentioned in the Quran, or how, when, what to pray, what to do on pilgrimage. These essential details are not in the Quran, but in other books. We read, narrated Al-Irbad ibn Sariya as-Sulami. They gathered, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, led them in prayer, stood up and said, "Does any of you, while reclining on his couch, imagine that Allah has prohibited only that which is to be found in this Quran? By Allah, I have preached, commanded, and prohibited various matters as numerous as that which is found in the Quran, or more numerous." You can see from this account there is a lot more for a Muslim to know which is essential, which is not in the Quran. This teaching is in other books. Thirdly, the Quran is not always clear, and Muhammad would explain it. These explanations are recorded in other books. Finally, the stories of the prophets in the Quran are not complete like they are in the Bible. Instead, only parts of the stories are told as way of illustration. It is from other books, not the Quran, that Muslims learn most of the details for the lives of the prophets. Well, what are these other books? These other books are called the Hadith, and often you will find that they are quoted by Muslims just as much as the Quran. The word Hadith is the Arabic word for a short story or account. The Hadith are large collections of these stories. The stories are normally about the actions and teaching of Muhammad and his companions, but sometimes about an earlier prophet too. These books provide the context for the Quran and essential teaching for Muslims. It is from the basis of the Quran and Hadith that the different Islamic schools make their Islamic laws, or Sharia. Now, Muslim scholars do not accept every Hadith as authentic, and during Islam's early history, famous teachers made collections of the Hadiths they considered reliable or for consideration. For Sunni Muslims, there are 6 main collections, with the collections of Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim being the main 2. And for Shia Muslims, there are different collections again. This raises the question as to what is the Islamic canon. In Christianity, our canon consists of the books of the Bible, and there is some variation across the church at this point. For Islam, the canon is not the Quran alone, but the Quran and Hadith, and so there are widely different canons used across Islam. This is important to remember because it partly explains why Muslims can believe such different things. But also, Muslims will want to compare the Bible to the Quran, but such a comparison does not actually compare the essential books. Christianity is based on the Bible, but Islam is not based on the Quran, but on the Quran and Hadith. And so to compare the Bible to the Quran is leaving out too many of Islam's essential books. Therefore, if a Muslim asks you to compare the Bible to the Quran, remember that you must consider the Hadith as well. I now want to consider how to read the Quran correctly. As Christians, we know that learning to read the Bible requires time and effort. You need to learn the one story that runs from beginning to end, the different covenants within it, the different styles of writing. And then, of course, there is the fact that Jesus fulfills these covenants and the promises that God made. This is how the Bible invites us to understand it, and these things need to be taken into account so that we can accurately read and apply all of the Bible. What about the Quran? How does it invite us to understand it? It does so in several ways. Firstly, it often makes an observation about creation, the sun or the moon, or some human activity, or some destruction, and it asks us to reflect and ponder upon this and to see God in it. For example, He produces for you corn, olives, date palms, grapes, and every kind of fruit. Verily, in this is a sign for those who give thought. Or it may ask you to remember the stories of the earlier prophets, as it uses these stories as illustrations for Muhammad's life. Sometimes the Quran says to listen to Muhammad and his explanation of it. We have sent down unto you, Muhammad, the message, that you may explain clearly to men what is sent for them, and that they may give thought. It also acknowledges that care needs to be taken when reading it. It is He who has sent down to you the book. In it are verses basic or fundamental. They are the foundation of the book. Others are allegorical, but those in whose hearts is perversity follow the part that is allegorical, seeking discord and searching for its hidden meaning. But by far the most important way the Quran invites us to understand it is from the fact that much of it is addressed to Muhammad himself. The Quran comes in response to certain situations in Muhammad's life, and so revolves around his life. Thus, the main characters in the Quran are the main characters in Muhammad's life. There is Muhammad himself, Allah, the angels, genies, Satan, Muhammad's wives, Jews and Christians, the books of God like the Torah, Prophet, Psalms and Gospel, the earlier prophets, the people of Mecca, the genuine Muslims and the hypocritical Muslims. And when you read much of the Quran, you are reading the interaction and arguments between these different groups. It may be about the people of Mecca rejecting Muhammad, or a question or a challenge put to him. It may be a prayer for the Muslim community or a legal decision. It could be a military or family issue, or some justification of Muhammad's behaviour. Sometimes the Quran is like a sermon addressing these different situations. But whatever the situation is, the Quran revolves around Muhammad, even if it doesn't mention his name. Therefore, if you want to understand the Quran, you need to know something of Muhammad's life. The easiest way to do this is to get a Quran which has a historical introduction to each surah. Now, not only does the Quran revolve around Muhammad's life, it also evolves around his life. The Quran evolves around Muhammad. This change mainly occurs as a result of Muhammad moving from Mecca to Medina. In Mecca, he had been a powerless preacher. He preached restraint, persuasion, sometimes gave threats, and had limited contact with Christians and Jews. But in Medina, he gained an army and started the Islamic State. His preaching now included legislation and warfare and the redefinition of the Arab religion. This is what Muslims call the time of organisation and is the imperial stage of Islam. He also had more contact with Christians and Jews. And so there are two types of surahs in the Quran, the Meccan surahs and the Medinan surahs. And for some topics, what the Quran says changes between these two periods. Let's consider the example of Muslim-Christian relations to see how the Quran changes over time. At first, we see that Muhammad was very positive towards the Christian Byzantine Empire. He saw their military victory as a good thing. We read, "The Roman Empire has been defeated in a land close by, but they, after this defeat of theirs, will soon be victorious within a few years. With God is the decision in the past and in the future. And on that day shall the believers rejoice." And so the Muslims will rejoice at the future victory of the Christian Byzantine army. Again, we see this positive attitude to Christians in these earlier verses. Invite all to the way of your Lord with wisdom and beautiful preaching, and argue with them in ways that are best and most gracious. You will certainly find the nearest in friendship to those who believe to be those who say, "We are Christians." But when the Christians didn't accept Muhammad as a prophet, his attitude towards them changed. Rather than peaceful debate, Muslims were now called upon to challenge Christians with a curse. "If anyone disputes in this matter about Jesus with you, now that full knowledge has come to you, say, 'Come, let us gather together our sons and your sons, our women and your women, ourselves and yourselves. Then let us earnestly pray and invoke the curse of God on those who lie. And then Muhammad moved beyond this cursing to military conquest. Fight those who believe not in God and the last day, and do not forbid what God and his messenger have forbidden. Such men as practice not the religion of truth, being of those who have been given the book, Christians and Jews, until they pay the tribute out of hand and have been humbled. It is he who has sent his messenger with the guidance and the religion of truth, that he may uplift it above every religion. And so Christians are to be conquered and subjugated because of what they believe. We read in the Hadith, Abu Hurairah reported Allah's messenger, may peace be upon him, as saying, "Do not greet the Jews and the Christians before they greet you. And when you meet any one of them on the road, force him to go to the narrowest part of it." That is, the Christian must get off the footpath when a Muslim is approaching. What the Quran says about Christians changes greatly over time. At first it is very positive, but by the end calls for their conquest and subjugation. And so you can see that the Quran not only revolves around Muhammad's life, but also evolves around it. Therefore, to understand the Quran properly, you must consider what it says when Muhammad was in Mecca and when he was in Medina. It may be that there is little difference, or there may be a significant difference, as we have just considered. One of the problems we can face is when people quote an earlier peaceful verse from the Quran and say that this represents the entire Islamic position. For instance, someone may quote Surah 582 that says that Christians are the nearest to Muslims, but this is not all that the Quran says on that matter, and simply quoting one early verse does not represent the Quran's final position. Now, the Quran itself is aware of its changing nature. It says, "None of our revelations do we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, but we substitute something better or similar. We exchange a verse in the place of another verse, and God knows very well what he is sending down." In Islamic theology, this is called the doctrine of abrogation. And so we see that there is an evolution in the teaching of the Quran with a spectrum of applications. Now, this raises the obvious question, which part do you obey? The answer is it depends upon how your context corresponds to that of Muhammad. It depends upon how your context corresponds to that of Muhammad. Therefore, if you are a Muslim living in a non-Muslim country and you are powerless, then you are like Muhammad living in Mecca. And so the Meccan surahs shape more of your obedience and attitude. But if you are a Muslim living in a Muslim country, then the Meccan surahs provide your direction. As Ahmed von Defner writes, many verses from the Meccan period may be especially meaningful to Muslims living in a strongly un-Islamic environment, while some of the Medinan period would appeal much more to Muslims who are in the process of formation of the Ummah, the Islamic State community. In some cases, unless one knows which of the two or more related verses was revealed first, one cannot decide which legal ruling is now binding upon the Muslims. Therefore, different verses apply at different times. This movement from Mecca to Medina shows us the goal of the Quran. It is the same goal as Muhammad's life. It is the creation of the Islamic State. It is he who has sent his messenger with the guidance and the religion of truth, that he may uplift it above every religion. This direction of the Quran from Mecca to Medina is meant to shape the direction of the Muslim community too, as they follow the example of Muhammad. That is, the Muslim community is meant to be in the process of forming an Islamic state like Muhammad. This is the political ideology of Islam that we see many Muslims in the world pursuing today. Not all Muslims want to do this, but within any group of Muslims, some or many will. This also means that you only see what Islam is really like when you see it in control of a country. There is no use looking at how Islam is practiced in Australia to see what Islam is like, because this is just the beginning stage of Islam. To see what Islam is really like, you must look at a country that it controls, like Iran or Saudi Arabia, because that type of control is the goal of the Quran. To conclude, the Quran is the collection of what Muhammad recited and claimed came from God. It only contains what Muhammad said and does not include any of the books of the Bible. Whereas Christians read and believe all the prophets, Muslims only listen to Muhammad, and this is why Christians and Muslims believe such different things. Islam is not based on the Quran, but on the Quran and Hadith. This is because the Quran does not provide its own context or the details for the essential practices of the Islamic religion. This context and these practices come from the Hadith literature. Finally, the Quran is a book that revolves and evolves around Muhammad's life. Because of this, some of its doctrines change as the situation in Muhammad's life changes, and its goal is the formation of the Islamic State.